Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, and a very warm welcome. And I mean that literally, it's about what, 90 degrees Fahrenheit outside. Thank you so much for taking the afternoon to join us. And also to our online community that's joining us from across the world, across time zones on Zoom. Thank you and welcome to our session. Over the next 75 minutes, we're going to be discussing implementation and challenges of three letters you may have seen all around the UN building today. SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. Leaders from around the world are gathered here to discuss the challenges and how to best implement these. The deadline is 2030, so over the next 75 minutes, we have two panels, a lot of ground to cover, and we are going to be looking at challenges as well as solutions. The event today is hosted by the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, also known as UN DESA. Before we begin, a few housekeeping rules, please. I would request everyone over here to put their digital devices, phones and laptops on silence. For our guests on Zoom, multilingual captions are available. So if you go to your screen, you will see an icon at the bottom which says captions. So please select your language. Also, please do share our conversation, take pictures, your comments, and you can post it on social media using hashtags, of course, SDGs. We do want to make the session as interactive as possible. We want to hear from you. So for that, we have online polls, live polls, as well as the option of posting your questions. Has anyone heard of the website Slido? So you go on Slido, that's slido.com, and put in the hashtag SDGs. If you're here in person, you will have a slip on your desk. It looks like this. That is the QR code. Please scan that. We have a poll there right now, and the poll is, what do you see as the major challenge to accelerating our progress on the SDGs in 2024 and beyond? Your options are persistent poverty and inequality, growing debt and lack of financing, climate change and environmental degradation, wars and conflict, lack of global cooperation and political will, or something else. Please do put in your votes. We will have the results out soon. And as you vote, I would like to invite the UN Under-Secretary General for Economic and Social Affairs, Mr. Lee Junhua, to address the audience to set the stage for today's discussion. Lee, all yours.
Thank you, Pavni, for giving me the floor. Just to share a few remarks with the participants. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to join today's event in this important dialogue on delivering the future we want. We all want a future where the dividends of the economic growth and technology advances are shared, resulting in inclusive and resilient societies and a healthy planet. To realize this vision, we must break down silos, demonstrate the unity of the purpose, and work together to overcome all those challenges. Furthermore, we must also focus and accelerate all our efforts on achieving SDGs. The 2030 Agenda is still the world's best roadmap to a future where the people's social and economic needs are met, and that our natural environment is protected for future generations. But however, the gap between the future we envisioned in the 2030 Agenda and the future we are heading towards is growing. Just 17% of the SDG targets are on track. Nearly half showed minimum or moderate progress, and more than 1/3 that are either stalled or regressed. Unprecedented challenges have strained our global commitments. For example, we had the highest number of the refugees and the forcibly displaced people recorded globally, up from the 80 million individuals 4 years ago to a staggering 120 million last year. Our planet also recorded its warmest year ever in 2023, with the greenhouse gas emissions reaching a new highs, further deteriorating our course to meet the promise of the Paris Agreement. Inequalities within and among the nations are also rising. Nevertheless, success stories shared by member states in the high-level political forum, including within the framework of the voluntary national reviews, provide credible reasons for hope. This progress should inspire further actions to accelerate the progress across the sectors. I'm confident that the speakers gathered here today, the members of the UN High-Level Advisory Board, including some of the very prominent renewed academic experts and the leaders of the UN Regional Economic Commissions, will put forward new inspiring ideas. As member states and the key stakeholders meet here at the United Nations for the high-level political forum on sustainable development, I trust that today's conversation will contribute to advancing the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. I also believe that this will further support September's summit on our common future, where the member states are expected to adopt an ambitious pact for the future to restore the trust in multilateralism. So, dear participants, since 2020, our global policy dialogues have been a crucial avenue to stimulate global conversations, showcase the innovations, and share best practices for achieving SDGs. My department, the UN DESA, is committed to providing detailed analysis and policy insights on the frontier issues and matters related to the sustainable development through our knowledge productions and platforms like this one. I want to encourage you all, including those online, to actively participate in our polls and ask your questions via the online platform to ensure that a rich and interactive dialogues and enrich discussions among all of us. So now that I will hand back to you, the moderator, please.
Thank you, Lee. Our polls are now closed. We have a winner here, actually. About 41% of you have voted for lack of global cooperation and political will as the biggest challenge to accelerate our progress on the SDGs. Second, we have persistent poverty and inequality. So we do have our work cut out for us over here at the UN. Now that I do have you, I would like us to vote again on a second poll that is going to go live now. Which of the following SDGs in focus at this year's high-level political forum do you see as the most challenging to accomplish? First goal, no poverty. Goal 2, zero hunger. Goal 13, climate action. Goal 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions? Or is it going to be goal 17, partnerships for the goals? And as you vote, I would like to introduce and invite our first panel. Thank you for already being seated over here. Our topic for this panel is how to best galvanize international cooperation to deliver the future we want. On my extreme left, please welcome Ibrahim El-Badawi. He's an economist. Expertise areas span Africa and the Middle East. He has held top positions at various organizations, including the government of Sudan, as well as the World Bank. Thank you, Ibrahim. Next to him, we have Rola Dashti. She is the Executive Secretary, Economic and Social Commission at the UN for Western Africa. She is a key Kuwaiti policy maker and best known for being a champion for women's rights. Thank you, Rola. Western Asia, sorry. And right next to me, Nargis Casanova. Her expertise spans Russia, Eastern Europe, and Central Asia, and she's also director of a program on Central Asia at Harvard University. Thank you all for being here. Let me first take a look at what our polls have to say on that. Okay, so about 35% over here, people say climate action is the SDG in focus, which is probably most challenging to accomplish. A close second, peace, justice, and strong institutions. Thank you, everyone, for your vote. Now, the questions to our panelists. Rola, I want to start with you. Could you give us the UN's perspective on key socioeconomic trends that you see as impacting the implementation of the SDGs in focus this year?
Okay. Two of them you already have stated, at least on socioeconomic: hunger issues, poverty, inequality on the rise, gender, SDG 5.
Rola, I'm sorry, your mic is.
Sorry. Okay.
Thank you.
Gender, I think all the social issues, yes, there is some advances in them in terms of health education, but they're not landing in terms of economic growth, at least in the region. In terms of employment, we have the highest unemployment, so SDG 8 is being impacted. The inequality in the region is between countries is enlarging as we go along. In the Arab region, we do have from high-income countries to countries in conflict to least developed countries, let alone in the middle-income countries. Today, the poverty is high among middle-income countries. We're seeing some progress, but it's not as expected into it. A good number of countries have between 25 to 30% poverty rates into it. Good news, the high-income countries, the Gulf Cooperation Council countries, have already reached the zero poverty SDG goal number 1, based on $2.2 per day into it. But these types of challenges, okay, there is also potential opportunity we just heard on the technological advancement. And I think now what we need is to leverage the 5th industrial revolution in terms of utilization of technology to address these types of challenges. In terms of poverty, I mean, and we're talking about women empowerment and opportunity more. In addition to empowering women, I think we need to create opportunities for women. And then here we're talking about creating digital mobile payment schemes, digital banking, mobile banking. It's financial inclusion becomes extremely important to reduce poverty. A lot of the women are in the informal sector where they're very vulnerable to any shocks. We saw it as COVID, shocks in climate shocks, floods, droughts is also impacting them. So there needs to be also mechanisms. And here we can use technology, the 5th industrial technology, in terms of smart and precision farming to enhance production of agricultural outputs, to reduce waste, and increase the productivity as well, since women are very much engaged in agriculture also as a productive activity. So we can, multiple SDGs could be accomplished by harnessing the 5th industrial revolution as we go along.
That's an interesting point. Ibrahim, could you come in and tell us how these, whatever, Rola listed a bunch of challenges, how do you see these intersecting with the economic challenges, particularly in your area, especially Africa?
Thank you. Yes, I think economic challenges obviously have always, especially the global supply shocks and the debt crisis. These are very important impediments to progress in SDGs. But I would like actually to, especially the two regions that I know the most, Africa and the Middle East, I would like to single out conflicts and fragility as very critical in terms of why these two regions are not really meeting the SDGs. The reason being because actually, while conflict is a product of poverty and failure to manage social diversity, once ignited, it can actually run havoc to almost all SDGs, especially the SDGs that are in focus: hunger and poverty, and even also impact on climate action and cooperation. So I think because once you have a fragile and dysfunctional state, it becomes very difficult to build any kind of partnership or climate action, let alone, of course, the issues associated with hunger. And so what are the prospects for dealing with this? I would suggest that, drawing from the scholarship community, that close collaboration between the UN system at all levels and the regionally mandated institutions in the context of Africa, the African Union, the Peace and Security Council, the IGAD, the ECOWAS, and also the Arab League in the Middle East and North Africa. And I think the multidimensional peacekeeping forces are very important for building peace and, if necessary, enforcing peace. And the reason being is because in many of these countries, it is very difficult for the civilian democratic forces to gain space in the midst of violent conflicts, such as what is happening in my home country, Sudan. And the experiences of multidimensional peacekeeping operations since World War II suggest that they are very effective in improving the quality of peace building because of their, they bring in, promote international standards in security reforms and DDR and preparing for elections and so on. But very importantly, also the scholarship community, broadly agree that peacekeeping operations are very good as long as they are there. Once they leave, then the sustainability of peace become a challenge. And that's the reason why it is very important also for peace building and transition to embrace transformational growth strategies, because actually development and growth are very important for smoothing interethnic cooperation and promoting positive relationship in many countries in Africa and the Middle East that are affected by difficulties in promoting cooperative interethnic cooperation in these countries. So I think there are three issues in terms of thinking ahead: a much closer collaboration between the UN system and regional institutions. Very important to emphasize the transition to democratic civil peace, and then developmental aspects in order to inculcate sustainability and resilience.
Thank you, Ibrahim. Nargis, you were nodding throughout, so can we get the view from Central Asia from you, please?
Yes, well, I would say that there are three big trends that affect the policy making and the implementation of SDG in Central Asia and everywhere else. And these are growing insecurity, growing uncertainty, and growing geopolitical divisions. And it is becoming more and more difficult to to be strategic, and you need to be strategic to actually pursue the implementation of SDGs. You need to do proper planning. You need to understand trade-offs. You need to understand what resources you can draw on, and so on and so forth. And when you have crisis after crisis, and that's what we all face. Yesterday it was pandemic. Today it's floods, and or your exports, affected by sanctions or counter sanctions, and so on. So you governments end up reacting to crisis, jumping from one crisis management into another, and they already limited capacities and resources are spent on these reactive measures. One note about geopolitical divisions. On the one hand, they do bring certain opportunities to developing countries. We see it in Central Asia because great powers, driven by the competition logic, they mobilize more resources. They try to build partnerships, and that's for the sake of maintaining leadership, fostering leadership, but also for other interests to ensure supply chains, and to have access to resources, critical materials, and so on. But we do understand that in the medium and long term, this is not very good, because there is a fragmentation of multilateralism, and the countries do feel squeezed in between. and pressure to make choices that they don't want to make. And I think that's a very important area that we all need to tackle cross-regionally to kind of to voice these concerns that you don't want to be squeezed by these divisions, and you don't want to be a loser in this competition. So I think that's an important conversation, like cross regionally. Definitely. What I think is really needed is capacity. Well, political will was mentioned, incredibly important, but capacity is needed and resources are needed, and that's where the international community can play a role, and the UN can play a big role. And here I want to second what my colleagues said about the importance of the regional level, regional cooperation, regional cooperative frameworks. I think very important, because we do face similar issues, but each region has its own set of kind of specificities. And I think only as a region we can really, as regions together, not on, we can tackle challenges in an effective manner.
I want to talk to you about that in detail in my next question. Before I get into that, I do want to ask our audience members to please post your questions on Slido. And if you like any of the questions that are already there, you can vote them up so they come, top of my screen. Ibrahim, I want to go back to you. You mentioned, some challenges, especially peace and peacekeeping. Since you're also an economist and a former finance minister of Sudan, could you talk to us a bit about achieving the larger goal of SDGs, which is inclusive and sustainable growth? Like, what is the best economic approach, in your opinion, especially in that region?
I think the best economic approach would be to respect macroeconomic fundamentals, especially at the level of the fiscal policy and monetary policy. But then respecting macroeconomic fundamentals entails some short-run cost. So therefore, it has to be combined with and integrated into a broader agenda for social protection. For example, energy reform, subsidies of petroleum product has dominated the scene, in many countries in both the Africa and the Middle East. But then just removing subsidies is actually a blueprint for social instability. But then developing a communication strategy for a comprehensive program that we are graduating or transiting from subsidizing commodities to providing social protection through various means, most notably through cash transfers, would be a very effective political economy approach, as well as it makes a lot of sense in terms of the holistic approach to economic reform that would also lead eventually, hopefully, to broad-based growth. Of course, obviously, you need also to have investment. You need to create the business environment and the climate environment for investment, and also the efficiency of investment. And of course, the empowerment of the population, especially rural population in agrarian societies, in order to create to create value and benefit also from this created value.
Thank you. You mentioned empowering societies and members of societies. Rola, I want to talk to you about that, since so much of your work has been in gender rights. Could you talk? You did mention that in your first answer a little bit, but could you elaborate a bit on how we can put gender rights front and center of this, and what are the big challenges on that front when you look at issues around peace and environment?
Yes, and I think we've done so much work as we go on women empowerment, in terms of economic empowerment, in terms of women access to education. But we keep on talking about empowerment, forgetting the other side, which is creating opportunities for these women. In the absence of creating of opportunities, you're creating frustration. After you're empowering a person and you're not creating an opportunity for them, that empowerment goes nowhere. So we need to balance also the opportunity side. So we need to focus on opportunities as we move along. Today in our region, we have successfully got women more in education, in the tertiary, in the universities. Now in the Arab region, I think around 65 to 70% of the students in universities are women. Okay, these women are going to graduate. Now, where is the labor market for them? Where is the labor market is limited labor opportunities, and it's always with cultural, it will be focused towards the young male because they are heads of households. So here we are going to be faced also with some social clashes in terms of discriminatory within a limited workforce. So we're having an investment in education, but we're not reaping as a society the benefit of that investment in education and investment in women. Where they ended up going to also the informal sector. So here is a woman in the informal sector. The majority of women are working in the informal sector. And all of us knows that informality and the marginalization with informality in terms of opportunities and the accessibility to social protection schemes, they're part of the pension funds and all the issues that they're vulnerable in terms of, and when we're talking about women in this informal sector, climate becomes a big issue. And any climate resilience becomes, now we're getting into water scarcity in our region. Our region is one of the most regions of water scarce region. 2/3 of the water, fresh water that is coming to the region crosses one or more political boundaries. So we go back into regional cooperation is key for the water so that livelihoods of the women who are working on agriculture so that to reap benefits. So political issues also will impact indirectly through the water issue, the climate issue, floods, for example, or sandstorms as we go along. Women we're talking about conflicts, they're absent in the negotiation and mediations. So we need women, peace and security. When we're talking about engaging women, we haven't done so much in making sure women are in the table to discuss peace processes when there is negotiation. And this is extremely important as they are one of the key elements and factors in the society who will be impacted. Women are peacemakers. They try to create peace instead of trying to create conflicts into it. So also we need to invest in women to be part of the mediation and negotiation for peace building as we go along. We don't have that much, especially in areas we're having conflicts. We see the people who are negotiating and the women are not that much are in the table discussing this. In countries which are stable, we're having a progression in women in the decision-making in the political field, but that is not much as we would like to. Sometimes we get some advances, but at the later stages, we're getting some regressions as we go along. So we need to mainstream this process, and women is a key partner in making and shaping the future of its country and making sure that they are available, not only as a minister level or in parliament, but it's in the decision-making processes within the government itself. So in hierarchy of the governments, they are absent also. So you will see them ranking from around 15 to 20% of the decision-making within the governments itself are women. So there is a lot of investments that we need to do and engage women and invest in women on that things.
Thank you, Rola. My last question would be to you, Nargis. You mentioned international cooperation, particularly at the regional level. So what do you think the UN should focus on to achieve what you just mentioned in your first answer?
Well, focus on in terms of priorities, right? Well, it's such a difficult question because, well, if we take SDGs, they're all super important. You cannot, kind of take one without, but I think that goal 7, the goal 7, which is affordable and clean energy, is the one that is at the core of development and sustainability, but it's also where probably, maybe not most opportunities, but a lot of opportunities and openings are at the moment, because, well, the technologies are developing at a crazy pace, and kind of this I think these new opportunities, new windows are opening, and developing countries, Central Asian countries, can have new beginnings, well, use also their critical minerals to undertake energy transition, but also develop their economies, diversify their economy. So I think that's kind of where the dynamism is, where the openings are. So I'm not saying that don't focus on other priorities, but I want just to underscore the importance of this particular goal. And the international community, UN, can play a great role in helping build up capacity, provide resources to the region, but the region needs to do its own bit. I think the countries themselves should be in the driving seat, because it's their future, and they need to shape it. I don't think it should be donor-driven. I think it should be the countries-driven, but the help will be needed and much appreciated. So I think kind of these partnerships would be incredibly useful.
Thank you. We have one audience question that it's not addressed to any one of you, but I do want to throw it out and see who wants to pick it up. Are we adequately integrating cultural factors and actors into our efforts to deliver on the SDGs? The question has come from Steven Weiber from Netherlands. So thank you for your question. Do any of you want to pick this up? Integrating cultural factors?
I can link it to women. Women is a very polarizing subject when dealing in our region, the Arab region, when you speak about women. So the role of women in society is extremely important. It's polarization. Some of it is, a lot of it is driven because of cultural issues. So understanding culture and engaging and moving forward towards women engagement in public life is extremely important, because now we're moving the women from the private sphere to the public sphere. So we need to ensure that she still plays the role in her private sphere, but she also has a big role also in the public sphere for advancement of the society. That balancing act, that communication balancing act is extremely important, so that what we're trying to do is that previously, traditionally, women is playing the role in the private sphere, where male will play the role in the public sphere. What we're trying to say, even if the women engage in the public sphere, the male also needs to go play another role in the private sphere. So we need to balance both the role of women and the male in private sphere, as well as the role in balancing the role of women and the male in the public sphere. And this is where the culture, you undertake understanding the culture, but you're moving forward into it.
Thank you. There's another very interesting question. We talked about what the UN can do. We talked about what governments can do. What about the private sector? What role can it play? And I would actually like Ibrahim and Nargis, both of you, to answer it, but we only have 3 minutes, so a minute and a half each.
Yes, I think the private sector need to be convinced that, for example, when a Minister of Finance or a central bank governor undertakes macroeconomic reforms such as exchange rate adjustment, that it is not really just a policy change. It's really a major institutional design that is there to stay, and that it is part of a larger commitment to growth and to sustainability of the economy, so that the private sector can actually respond. And I think in our countries, the private sector can play a very important role, as much as they are able to predict the future of the policies, because actually, the problem of failure to commit by the government in a way that will give them credibility to the policies is one of the major, nagging problem for the private sectors.
Thank you, Nargis.
Well, private sector is crucial. That's where the resources and capacities are. I don't think much can be done without the private sector. But of course, there is certain risk aversion, and in terms of investing in in emerging economies, and there are the roles of the international organizations, IFIs, and donor countries is important in terms of the schemes of, insurance schemes, kind of ensuring political risks and so on, so kind of making it easier for foreign investors to enter countries and economies. But I think private sector is also, they do understand the trends. They do understand the kind of, that's the direction the world should be going. So you do see efforts among the private sector as well, kind of to align themselves.
Thank you, Nargis. With that, we've come to the end of our first panel discussion. We have another poll for you, our audience members. We'll have that up shortly. So the poll is, what measure is most needed to strengthen our capacity to cope with complex challenges and advance the SDGs? You have 6 options: build capacity of key decision makers and stakeholders, strengthen foresight capacity to ensure a long-term vision, improve public engagement, strengthen the science policy society interface, so between the 3 of those, mainstream SDGs in business strategies, or something else. So as you vote, I'm going to request our first panel to please take your seats and invite our second panel. I would also like to show you a video by UN DESA called A Moment of Choice and Consequence for a Better Future. So let's roll that tape too.
We meet again and again, and we discuss again and again. We live as if we always have forever. Humanity has been continually preoccupied with the future, toiling to secure profits, holding on to power, and extracting precious resources. At what cost? Millions of people have been pushed into extreme poverty and hunger. Conflict is upending countless lives, and environmental crises are threatening our planet. But the solution is clear and simple. We've had a blueprint for a healthy planet and thriving societies, allowing us to work together, not for our own agenda, but for the 2030 agenda. We stand at a critical moment of choice and consequence. The thirst for information has led to rich data to guide our decisions. We know what to do. We must act now and act boldly. This year, the High-Level Political Forum has a unique opportunity to focus on acceleration and implementation, and on envisioning a prosperous future. I'm waiting for you.
Thank you for that. Let's take a look at our poll results. It's pretty close, actually. The winner we have here is build capacity of key decision makers and stakeholders. That's at 26%. And just below that, we have a tie between strengthen foresight capacity to ensure a long-term vision and mainstream SDGs in business strategies. So that is what the audience says. Our second panel also touches upon this broader theme, and so I will now be talking to our panel over here. Thank you for taking your seat. Please allow me to introduce the speakers over here. On my extreme left, Isabella Teixeira. She is the former Minister of Environment from Brazil. In the middle, we have Mr. Clever Gatete. He is Executive Secretary, Economic Commission for Africa. Thank you. And right next to me, I have Ms. Armida Alishabana. She's Executive Secretary, UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. Thank you so much for being over here. I want to start with you, Armida, could you talk to us a little bit about, the SDGs are of course global, but they need to be implemented at the national level and of course at the very local level. Could you give us the UN's perspective on what the UN can do throughout, from planning to monitoring to evaluation?
Yes, I think UN at the global, regional, because I'm from Regional Commission as well as national level, RC and the country team have been actively supporting our member states in implementing SDGs from the planning as well implementation and monitoring evaluation. Yeah, so I think it's across the board. It's like that. Although there are differences across the countries depending on the capacity as well as the specific needs. But if I may, to give you a concrete example on two also support that as UN, we've been increasingly providing our member states, and which again also contribute to the effective preparation as well as implementation SDG at the national as well as the local level. One is the importance of data. Yeah, not jumping suddenly to the planning and so on, but if you do not have good data, right, data statistics in place, then you will not be able to do that. So hence, yeah, also the importance of data statistics and build the SDG progress monitoring and so on, evaluation. So therefore, this so-called SDG national dashboard, it becomes very important. And I think we've been supporting this, not only us, yeah, but the other regional commission, working very closely with the National Statistics Office, as well as the relevant agencies and the RC, don't forget. Second, you also mentioned local, yeah, because when we talk about SDG, it's not only about national. It doesn't stop at the national level, then okay, everything would be fine, yeah? And a lot of the implementation rests actually at the local level, especially district, for example, depending, yeah, on the countries, province, district, cities, and hence, yeah, if you notice, now increasingly getting very extremely popular, especially in Asia Pacific, is the so-called VLR, voluntary local reviews, hugely popular. So this is where we can help the respective local government to mainstream SDG implement as well as highlight, yes, certain priority areas.
That's interesting you mentioned data because someone in our audience has also talked about that. So thank you for answering that question as well. Clever, can we get you to weigh in on that same question? What do you think the UN could do to help implement the SDGs at the national and local level? And particularly, could you hone in on your expertise, which is the region of Africa, please?
Number one, I just don't want to separate SDGs from a national program. Because in our continent, you find a country has a vision, has a strategy, has a program, and that program includes SDGs. It includes the Agenda 2063 of the African Union. So this one, they are normally integrated in that kind of strategy. So there is nothing like separate of saying this is SDG, this is another program, this is another program. But they make sure that they integrate the entire SDGs into that. And let me just maybe tell you from my own experience, maybe two things. One, I was a Minister of Finance for a long time before I was the governor of the central bank. And one of the key problems that we used to have people who are highly experienced. They come and do a document for us. They say, here is a strategy, implement it. Since we never actually owned it, it became a problem. We never participated. And when you came up with something different of saying, let's have up the program, participatory in nature, not only the government officials, but also the other stakeholders up to the lowest level. And sometimes you bring in the private sector, civil society, we discuss it openly. Now, that brings in ownership. Then the most important issue that really changed our own way of doing things was when we introduced the performance contracts. Meaning, now you understand what you need to do. And it's not the people at the central government level, it's all the way down. And it's not only the government officials, it is also the civil society, the people there. Now, once we introduced it, everybody knows what we intend to do.
given the resources that you have, then, and we hold the officials to account on implementing that, it changed everything. But before that, it was really very, very difficult to be able to implement. Now, there are many other complex issues that are coming in. And that's why we need to look at the nexus between security and development. Sometimes you cannot, they are intertwined. And when you are coming up with a strategy or a development program, it should include everything. So that once you are implementing, at least you know that you are not making progress here and reversing on something else. So that kind of comprehensiveness becomes very, very important. Maybe that's what I can say for now.
Thank you, Cleaver. Isabella, I want to talk to you. You know, I was attending one of your sessions this weekend, and you mentioned tying in narratives, the local and the national narrative with the global narrative. So could you elaborate on that for our audience today, especially in context with, you know, the environment, which is your area of specialty?
Yes and no, because we don't have much time. And yes, because we need to do this, okay? But I'd like to highlight 2 or 3 things. When you look around here, you have young people here with us. So they must be here to propose things, okay? Not trying to listen things. If not, you cannot change. And why I'm saying this? Because I'm part of the team that proposed Sustainable Development Goals in Agenda 2030 more than 10 years ago. And after 10 years, everything's changed. Okay, so it's very interesting that we must discuss the challenges, the complexities, without understanding the change and how we move the pieces to consider the future. Climate change is a critical issue when you go to local and national realities, okay, because this collapses the future. It's true. In the past, you're too young. I'm not too young, unfortunately. But in the past, we used to discuss the future as something that you could think about. Today, we cannot, it's like a blur. We understand that we need to move the pieces, but we have risks. And we're looking forward to address well-being together with less risk society. What it means, the role of the social protection systems, how we should connect things locally to have good impacts nationally, and also to traduce, to translate common values or to unlock values that will promote us to rebuild trust, credibility, and transparency. And my last point, we cannot move the pieces without democracy, to understand not only our role to come together, to be engaged, but our core responsibilities. If you don't understand this as societies, at the local level, at the global level, at the national level, is happening what is happening today. It's a problem of the government. No, it's our problems to change things. So be committed, it's be engaged and be responsible and to respect institutions. And that's why it's very important to approach trade-offs and also to approach means of implementation, because if you don't have capacities, local and national ones, to change, again, we probably will postpone things and not work hard to transition. Transition doesn't mean to postpone. Transition means to be prepared for the transformation. And this must be changed if you want to play with less risk society in the future. If not, again, we need climate risk, nature risk, and the digital technological age coming and makes that true that how to like to change the world. And I do believe that we can change the world if you want and if you're committed. So let's do it. Why not? Okay, I think so.
Thank you, Isabella. Now, let's talk about cross-border risks. Han, what are the best ways, the sort of solutions approach on managing that? Because there are multiple challenges. I mean, you just spoke about the environment a lot, but there's also conflict, there's also inequality. So could I have each one of you sort of weigh in on that? Armida, do you want to begin?
Okay, thank you very much. Cross-border is not only risk, but also opportunities and potentials. And let me give you some example. The risk, the one that can be considered a risk is climate-induced disaster. That's for sure. Yeah, that is a risk. And we see that the past a decade or so, this has been the so-called elevated non-economic risk, especially in our region. So many disaster occurred, more frequent and also more intense, yeah? And hence this elevated non-economic risk. And then the other one is also air pollution, which is cross-border. And because of these various sources, yeah, of course, air pollution. But another one, if I may, ocean-based climate action. That is risk as well as potential. But the potential is definitely examples such as connectivity, land-based connectivity, yeah, that is cross-border. That is potential, but how to mitigate the risks induced by climate, then we need to mainstream also the climate as well as the sustainability into the transport. Yeah? So hence the sustainable transport connectivity, the land-based, for example, as well as the maritime transport. Yeah, in our region is also big. This is cross-border, and so therefore, how to mitigate? One of that is through cooperation, regional cooperation. And this is where us, yeah, as a regional commission, one of our work is to facilitate that regional cooperation to mitigate the risk for countries to work together. And for example, in the case of air pollution, because the source comes from many countries, adjacent countries, neighboring countries, but if the countries deal it bilaterally, I think it's kind of difficult. So it has to come together, several countries, whether sub-regional or regional.
Could you give us an example of an approach that has worked?
That one has worked, exactly that particular one. Again, as you see.
The air pollution one.
Air pollution, South Asia, it was Southeast Asian. So we work together with the countries. Okay, what are the sources, whether agriculture residue, for example, whether from energy and so on and so forth. Yeah, and it is built within the framework of regional cooperation.
Thank you, and I especially appreciate that because I'm from New Delhi, so I understand when you say air pollution. Thank you. Clever, do you want to weigh in?
I answer it by a story, maybe, if you allow.
Yes, please.
And that would be a very good example. I was the Minister of Finance when we had a problem. A country, Rwanda, which is landlocked, sometimes double landlocked, because we were either imported or exported through Mombasa in Kenya, crossing Uganda, or through Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. And there was a problem where the delays was too long. From Mombasa to Kigali, it was 21 days. To Kampala, it was 18 days. To Burundi, it was 22 days. And our president put people on the track. Then they went from Kigali through Uganda to Kenya. And they say, whatever you are required, just pay it. Wherever you are stopped, just take notes, and so forth. So when he got the report back, he called a summit of the Northern Corridor. There was Uganda, there was Burundi, there was South Sudan, there was even Ethiopia as an observer, and Kenya. And then he presented the whole report. He says, this is how long they took on the border. These are how many roadblocks that are in Uganda and Kenya. These are how many way bridges. These are so many things. And then the people are paying double in terms of, triple in terms of insurance. You would need insurance for your goods in Kenya, in Uganda, and in Rwanda. So it was taking a long time. So in that meeting, they took decisions. They said 0 roadblocks because there's no country that's at war. Number 2, only the way bridges at entry and exit. They said they should not be stopped at the border. They should instead apply the cargo tracking system on the track so that it doesn't divert. They should use COMESA, Common Market for East and Southern Africa, insurance. That means use one across the border. They should remove roaming charges so that you can do business wherever you are without necessarily being charged and all that. They took it in 1 week. The days changed from 21 days to 5 days to Rwanda, and also to 4 days in Uganda. That was just a decision that was taken there and then, and it was a win-win situation. So what that means is that when neighbors work together, they understand the problems, they understand the challenges, they also understand the benefits for their own societies. Really, it works out. But it requires that kind of cooperation among the member countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Clever. Isabella, I want to talk to you, and it's interesting you mentioned Summit, Clever, because like I was talking to you before, Brazil is in a very interesting position right now, particularly the next 2 years, because this year it is the president of the G20. Next year it will be hosting COP, I think it will be COP 30. So when it comes to the environment, could you talk to us about what a unique opportunity that is for Brazil, and as former Minister of Environment there, what do you think the country should do in terms of using that position to manage, like I said, cross-border risks when it comes to the environment?
Okay, I think that we have to do a lot of things. Okay, we are not only chairing G20 this year, you chair BRICS Plus conference next year together with COP30. And this means how Brazil will go to discuss these global issues inside 9 nations, outside 9 nations. It's a big challenge because 10 years ago or 15 years ago, we only discussed global commons issues considering 9 nations framework. And this means that we have new dynamics, not only geopolitical ones, but also economic ones, and how diplomacy is coming or should come, okay? Because the challenges, you have new complexities in the world, and this means that you have new dynamics, and this means that also you have the world in movement. It's very interesting because it's absolutely different. Even consider all the negotiation that we adopt for Paris Agreement. I was the Brazilian head of delegation, the head of Brazilian delegation. It's absolutely absolutely different. So Brazil has to manage our realities because we have inequalities. You know that not only social ones. You need to understand that the solutions for decarbonization routes or decarbonized routes demands natural resource and environmental impact, demand pressures, okay, pressure on the environment. And you need to understand, for example, that you go through artificial intelligence, energy demand is 10 times more than the Google research today. Nobody connects this. When you go to the data center, that's so critical. Okay, we go to developed countries, they bring data center based on gray energy. And you go to the developing world, they have alternative, but you need also to conciliate with the demand of water. So the pressure on nature, that means biodiversity plus natural resources, is so high. In a country that has a diversity assets like Brazil, nature assets, we need to understand the impact in short-term and long-term perspective. So discuss the trade-offs of short-term and understand how solutions will impact the future is for me a critical situation today in Brazil. That's why I think that Brazil, when we discuss delivering the future that we want, we need to understand the present that we need. Okay, how we manage the present today to have better choice and the right choice, consider the future. My last point, we cannot forget the role of trade, of international trade. Brazil, it's in also domestic trade. When you go into the new energy source like hydrogen, high biofuels, second generation, etc., we cannot forget the role of national markets and how we provide solutions to allow, for example, the raise of income and to minimize social inequalities. So it's really important in a huge country like Brazil, how you consider our national markets, how you consider our society, how we go together with our friends regionally, and how we can play as a solution providers globally. This is a big challenge. What it means, we need to have Brazil back, yes, but we need to have the future back in Brazil if we want to play an innovative role.
Could you give us an example of, you mentioned so much transformation, of a time when you when you were in government, when you achieved a desired transformation?
Look, when I go, an issue that is critical for everyone is hunger, okay, and food production and food security. When you connect the dots and you consider Sustainable Development Goals, it's very interesting, climate, because you're going to connect the dots, consider food security, nutrition security, food risks, soil quality, fertilizers, biofertilizers, SAF, the Sustainable Aviation Fuels, and you mix energy security together with mining security, with food security and climate security. When you go into this situation, this is the reality. How do we emerge a new business model, allow private sector to be engaged to add funds, et cetera, how you go to international trade, who will come to provide solutions. When you go into this reality, it's fascinating because we can do things, but you don't have all the frameworks, that platforms that you need to be really well structured to provide solutions nationally and globally. So we need to discuss scales, and we need to discuss also the trade-offs, because transition costs a lot. And this is the new mindset that will emerge. So we need coherence in our public sectors and public policy, and we need to come with transparency with our society to explain and to come together as society, how would you like to change? If not, you put democracy in checkmate. And as recently Brazil was so exposed to democracy crisis, I recommend everyone, please preserve democracy in your countries and understand the trade-offs and how complex it is to change. But if you come together to restore trust, understand the role of multilateral system, probably will move the peace faster than we are doing today, and Brazil will come with food security together with energy security and climate security and water security, and of course, be happy. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabella. I do want to take some audience questions, and there's one that I think is particularly very interesting, because when we speak of complex challenges, we're talking about, global challenges like peace and climate change, and of course, those are critical. But there's one challenge that, according at least to the WHO, 1 in 6 people face, and that is disability. So one question that has come, and a couple of people have actually asked this, someone, Shivaji Kumar from Patna in India, has asked, how do we involve persons with disabilities for SDGs around the world? And Clever, do you want to take that?
Yeah, thank you very much. Because for me, one of the things that most countries, including my own, took was to make sure that really someone with disability does not mean that you don't have the same capacity like anybody else. It is just like putting all the facilities that are required for this person to be able to function, meaning the technology that you use, the facilities that are needed, that one they should be able to, they should have the right to participate like anybody else. I think what the government does is to make sure they have the same rights, but also to put the infrastructure and the facilities in place to make sure that they participate. And here, while I still have the floor, I just wanted just to say, when you are talking about complex situations, it is like, for example, the one that we have now on debt, on financing, and on other things. And when you talk about the capacity, we should not look only at the university capacity and all other things. There are things that are, for example, the ECA, we have EDEP, which is a training center. And when you are training, you look at all the areas of the SDGs, but also in the case of finance, we look at the macroeconomic management area. There are 4 areas usually when you are looking at the macro model. It is the whole fiscal side, it is the real sector, which is the productive sector, balance of payments, and financial. So how they meet together and what the implication of it, it's not something that they teach you in school sometimes. But this is what we provide. We also look at climate, we also look at other things. And these are the areas that we really provide, including the capacity for negotiation, because that's where most people fail, the big contracts. Most countries you find they have minerals, they have this, but depending on the regime that was there during that time, the contracts are badly written, they are not in the favor of the nationals. And now that's why we had this Africa regional, legal facility in ADB to assist the people to negotiate so that you can have better deals that are in line with providing advantages for the nationals. And that one has really helped. The other area also is the research. Now we are transforming, because we are doing research at the, one of the areas of ours is being a think tank. So the researcher now, which we have as a research for informed decisions, we are now translating it, because normally the research are published in journals, which a head of state doesn't read, a minister doesn't read, the high officials don't read. So what we are trying to do now is to see how we can bring this research, translate it in a language that they can understand, and be able to advise the countries on how to make sure they can use them for implementation. So this way then it helps in terms of bringing the capacity for complex issues that we are talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Clever. Armida, I'm going to have you have the last word here. There's an interesting question that has been voted up by at least 5 people. Omar Mobashir is asking, what repercussions are there for those who don't meet the SDGs? He says relying on goodwill doesn't seem to be working. So what about, and he's suggesting trade embargoes for those who fall short. What do you think?
I think for SDG to be successful, yes, so everybody has to have this ownership, sense of ownership. It's not the other way around. You need to be, you need to feel you are part of it. Yeah. Otherwise, then it will not be supported. That's number one. Number two, it has to be put also within the national and local context. Yeah. If it doesn't, let's say, if in terms of labeling, yeah, sometimes it's also sensitive. If you comes to a country with already a certain labeling, whereas inside the labeling is actually, that is what the countries subscribe to, endorse to, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So maybe, yeah, just put it in the context of the national and local level. And actually SDGs are quite universal. If you see all, yeah, it's basically everybody's priorities. Yes, so it has to have the buy-in, first of all, and not on
So
the
no
other way
trade
around,
embargoes.
right? Yeah, no.
So you can't force
for
people.
sure, no.
Okay. Yes, of course.
Because what she's saying, and actually my sister here, Isabel, mentioned it earlier, inclusiveness is very important. Because sometimes when you say include the youth, you think it is just another function, but they are the ones who actually are going to be affected in the future. And there are two things. They learn, they understand what you do as government. They also look at the future because they still have a long way to go. And they know that these ones are going to benefit them. So that kind of inclusiveness brings ownership, but also empowers them. As they are young, they don't know much, but they are learning. And the only way to pass over the leadership is actually to engage them so that they are part of the process as we move forward. So that one should be done knowing that there is generational changes at some point, and they need to be empowered. They cannot start, when they are old, when they don't have experience, when they have not been exposed. So this should be done deliberately in terms of really the intergenerational kind of in mind. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. With that, we're done with our two panels.
Just had a
Of course.
final comment. Just to highlight how the new movements, the political movements, very interesting when you go into the realities. President Lula suggests to have a G20, social G20, okay? Not necessarily the economic G20, okay? This is how you have new lens to understand the G20 countries or the other ones, not only the biggest economy in the world. Second, when you go into G20 meetings today, Brazil brought the climate finance into the track of finance. This is so innovative because we need to understand if we're going to finance development, we're going to finance climate, we are going to finance both ones, we are going to discuss CBDR or not, we are going to be, so how the society must understand the complexities, what you need to change. So my recommendation, connect the dots. When we propose Sustainable Development Goals, we propose not as silos or clusters. We propose how the countries will connect, the society will connect, and adopt narratives to make sure that we can move the pieces considered the sustainable development, inclusive future. So please don't fragment it anymore. Okay, go try to connect, tell the stories about the new stories about the future, and leave the past in the past, and let's change. Thank you.
That's a great note to end on.
Next year, when you call us, make sure you include also the change in education system, especially in the view of technology, when you talk about the capacity and the involvement of the private sector, so that we really have a real discussion.
Yes, we did mention the fifth revolution in our first panel. So thank you. That is for organizers of food for thought for next year. But before we jump to next year, I do want to invite Mr. Naveed Hanif. He is UN Assistant Secretary General for Economic Development. So please.
Thank you, Pavni, and it's a very hard act to follow after 6 very distinguished panelists. But I don't think I'll have many new things to add, but when I use my mental map, how do I look at the complexity? In the 90s and 2000s, we had a bridge to the future. You could walk on it without worrying about too many things. Now we have a tight rope to the future. Strong winds, which is climate change. Very unbalancing act, which is neo-demographics. And globalization, which is growing and it's being reduced. These are three winds. If you're, imagine a tight rope with a deep ditch under your feet and you have to go to the future. This is the complexity that I imagine when I think of how things have changed since the 90s. So when I look at that complexity, how do we need to think about it? I think we need to question the orthodoxy. The economic orthodoxy, which says social outcomes are externalities, environmental impact is an externality, will not work on this tightrope. please do not be driven by orthodox economics. That's what policymakers should rethink. So what do we do? I know, Pavni, I have very limited time. And these are not three new ideas. One is, and this is a major flaw, the way we measure and celebrate progress. Just by looking at economic growth, we have to do away with it. SG has a proposal beyond GDP. We have the multidimensional vulnerability index, many other measures. I think SDGs themselves are a very good measure to look at a society, how is it doing socially. So my first recommendation, let's change the way we measure and celebrate progress. It should be about the lived experience of every human being on this earth, not just a few. Second, and that's where I am not going to sound as a socialist or a communist. Why are we living with market logic? But if we have to live with market logic, tilt the markets towards sustainable development. And that's not difficult. There is no invisible hand. Adam Smith didn't believe in this. There is a visible hand which is shaping markets. The investors, the regulators, and the beneficiaries. Tilt the markets towards sustainable development, which doesn't say social outcome is not my headache. That is not an externality. It's your behavior which determines my future as a young person. I am not, but those who are. So let's tilt the markets towards sustainability. And lastly, institutions are nothing but people and processes. It's not books and buildings. Invest in people, and you also got this comment from the audience. Invest in public sector decision makers. They just can't handle the technologies disrupting our lives. So regulations are comprehensive, can capture the new realities and shape those for the benefit of everyone and for the environment. And redesign institutions also. Ministries looking at 5 issues separately doesn't work anymore, nor does it work for institutions global level. So national institutions, global institutions need to be redesigned and rethought. Thank you so much, Pablo.
Thank you, Naveed. Achieving the SDGs was always going to be hard, but I do like your approach, which is think outside the box. I think that has been the big key takeaway for me, at least. And today we discussed a lot of the big challenges. But I think what was most interesting was our discussion on the more granular issues that people like you and I face. People with disabilities, women, and just our general everyday lived experiences. So thank you to our panelists on my left, on my right. Naveed and Lee, thank you so much. I'd also like to thank you and DESA for organizing this event, the Global Communications team, everybody for putting this all together. Of course, our audience for taking the afternoon to be here with us, our audience on Zoom that is joining us from different time zones. For you, there will be a exit survey that will pop up when you leave the Zoom room. Please do give us your suggestions. We really enjoyed listening to what you had to say, and this really helps us put together events like these. We already have a suggestion for next year, so if you want to vote that up, please do that as well. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful week.